So let's move on to actually attaching the skin of the fuselage to the airframe. Here's some of the 1mm printed foam with the scheme on. This is the classic, but obviously there are a few schemes that are available. They all assemble in exactly the same way. We just need to extract our part Z1 and prepare it for putting onto the airframe itself. All these parts are cut out using a laser, and in certain areas the laser can be quite aggressive, so what we do is we score the area and it allows us to then cut the part out with a knife, but provide a guide for the knife itself. Now, in the instruction manual there is a guide to show you where to bevel and where to score. The first score of only a few scores that are required on this fuselage is from the rear of the undercarriage strut through to the tail. It's pretty obvious. The guide in the manual will show you exactly where to do it as well. The technique for scoring that I use is to essentially use the knife in reverse, use the back of the knife to create a fold in the foam. So as you can see, I'm just pressing relatively hard, and that just creates a line in the foam that we can then use for folding it. You may notice that when I do the score, the knife is obviously reversed, but is also quite shallow. I'm not going in hard at an angle. I'm keeping it fairly shallow to the actual plane of the material, so that I can put a good amount of pressure on, but not be fearful that the knife's going to go through the material. So there we've got our scores, so that you'll see that when we do come to bend the foam around the frame, we've got some really nice, precise folds to go on. The next fold is on the undercarriage itself, and this is just going from the corner of the leading edge corner through to the trailing edge corner where it meets with the fuselage, the main fuselage itself. A couple more scores that I haven't pointed out just yet, but you will see in the assembly guide. A couple just on the undercarriage. You'll notice on the part here that there are some notches in the undercarriage protrusions, and those just indicate where you need to pop a score on both sides of the undercarriage. I believe that's the scoring done. Now we need to bevel. It's not absolutely necessary. You can build the aircraft without beveling, but what the beveling actually does is allow the other parts of the fuselage that we'll be attaching to marry up with the edges of these parts more precisely, with a greater surface area, and obviously less white edge of material showing. On the instructions that you get in the kit, you'll see that the edges that we need to bevel to around about 45 degrees are the top edge of the fuselage up here. It comes into contact with the what's called the turtle deck on both sides, and we also need to bevel at the nose here where the material on the underside of the aircraft attaches, so up here and along there, and also around where the undercarriage struts are, as there are pieces of material that will match up and enclose the undercarriage. So the technique with beveling, you can do a number of ways. You can hold the part and gently bevel the area that you want to sand, or sand the area you want to bevel. Or you can actually pop this down onto a surface right at the edge of the surface. Now I know I'm off camera here, and that's actually a very good way of doing it because it supports the underside of the material, and your bevel will actually appear a lot quicker. That's great if you've got a nice straight area to bevel. Not so good obviously if it's curved. So for example, on this curved area here that I want to bevel, I'm going to hold it and I'm going to put my fingers behind the material, so it's supported with my fingers, and then I'm going to use the sanding stick just to gently take the material away and just inspect it now and again. And what we're looking for is a fairly even bevel of around about 45 degrees, taking the whole of the edge to a point basically, so that when the other 45 degree material sits on there, the amount of material with a white edge is minimal. The last bit of beveling required is at the tail here, which is a what we term a shallow bevel. So we basically want to get a fairly long bevel that's a little more shallow than the 45 degrees. These surfaces will be attaching themselves to the rear of the airframe, so if we get a nice shallow bevel on these, then it'll look nice and neat, and there'll be a fairly large surface area that we can get the glue onto to adhere the skin onto the airframe itself. So as you can see, it's just a gentle process of creating a point at the rear of the fuselage skin. And when you catch it in a certain light, you can see exactly how much material you've actually removed. As you can see, I'm supporting the rear face of the material with a finger, which really helps. There we go. The other thing we can do is, if you want to make these folds a little bit easier. They tend to sort of spring open quite readily. You can actually reverse each of these creases and just gently, very gently, take away some of the material. You have to be careful though, because obviously if you go too far, you'll break through, cause a break in the skin itself. Once again, not a massive issue. You can repair it with glue, but it's best if you don't do it in the first place. And what you'll find is that the crease actually bends a lot more readily and stays creased if you take some of that material in the fold away. And then it makes it a lot easier when you're actually installing it for the sides to stay stuck to the airframe itself. No need to do it on these because these are actually going to be folding outwards rather than inwards. The tips of the undercarriage legs will actually be folding in like that, but that's fine. You can see, you can actually, the skin of this material is pretty resilient, so you can fold it all the way over without it breaking or you losing the graphic on the outside or splitting it or cracking it. So okay. The next step is to put the skin of the fuselage onto the frame. Now this is probably one of the most challenging tasks of the build, but it's something that you can take stage by stage. And as long as you follow these steps, take it bit by bit, then you shouldn't have a problem with it. And the great thing is, if you do have a problem, or you find that you've misaligned something, or it's twisted, or you're not particularly happy with it, you can reverse the build. You Who Pour can be dissolved, and it can be dissolved using something that you can obtain at pretty much every supermarket there is. It's essentially lighter fluid, or naphtha. I'll just grab some. Here we go. The great thing about this is that it won't melt the foam. It won't take off the print either, but it softens up Yoo-hoo so that parts can be pulled apart and then re-glued, which makes every step that you take building a Microaces kit completely reversible. And that's not just straight after you've built it, that's a year down the line. If you want to take a wing off, re-rig something, anything like that, using a little bit of lighter fluid brushed on with an artist's or a modelling brush, a hobby brush, will soften up the joint and it can then be pulled apart. And I'm sure I'll be showing more of this in a later video, but it's really good to know, and especially good in steps like this that require multiple steps, and you may find at the end of it that you're not happy with the result. So there's a quick tip if you didn't know about that. Okay, back to putting the skin on the frame. Now the first step is to align the skin on the frame correctly, and that's what this little tab on the keel is all about. You'll notice on the frame there is a hole centrally on the skin itself, and that is to accommodate that lug on the keel itself. So once we've located that, then the position fore, aft, left and right is set for the airframe. And then there are a number of little markers that I'll show you along the way to help you attach the airframe. Now we're going to take this step by step. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to glue the bottom of the skin onto the airframe itself. As you can see, as I've got it pressed against dry fitting it on the airframe at the moment, the undercarriage gets a little bit tangled around here, so all you have to do is just move the parts out the way of each other, bring the airframe up, and then it's a lot easier to manage. But that's the first stage we're going to do, and then we can start attaching the sides from there on in. So I'm happy with that fit. My tail wheel is pushing out at exactly the right place. If I needed to take a little bit more material out of the back of the skin here, I could do. Just requires a little bit of a cut, but I'm quite happy with that. So what I'll do now is just apply some glue to the keel and the formers. There we go. And then, once I've got the glue out of the way, we can present that onto the skin. So locate our lug on the frame and then press everything down, bring the undercarriage around the undercarriage frame, go, and we're located. And the one thing we can check now is just here, we just want that skin going around about halfway across the former there. We've got more parts to put on the underside of the aircraft here, and if we have a little bit of a ledge there, that allows us to locate the material fairly nicely on there, and it's supported underneath too. Okay, let's get the rest of this skin onto the fuselage frame. It's pretty straightforward, but there are a number of things to take note of when you're putting it together, and I'll just go through those before we start fitting. Firstly, we'll start at the tail here, and the top of the skin of the fuselage here should be flush with the top of the keel, and this should happen on both sides as well, because this is the area here where the horizontal stabilizer sits, and if your levels are correct, then your horizontal stabilizer will be horizontal. If not, then it's not a huge problem. You just get your sanding stick out and sand material away until you do get a nice flat surface for the tail to sit on. But if you do it correctly in the first place and keep note of that as you're bringing your sides up, then all the better for it. Moving along the fuselage, the tops of the skin should come probably around about 1 millimetre above the 3 formers in the tail. The little beveled area that we produced before in the previous stage, that should just be nudging above those formers. Moving up to this particular former here, there's no beveling across the top here, and in fact the top of the skin should sit at the same level as the top, not the tabs, but the top of this particular former. And when we reach here at the cockpit area, the right angle on the skin should actually come to the top of the forwardmost former and cover it and sit flush against its front face, like so. And that is a very important part of the geometry of this particular aircraft, getting that correct, because then the hatch and all of the bits and pieces that sit in this area will fit really neatly and nicely. The other area to take care with is at the nose and this scooped area here. Now, behind this scooped area there should be a curved part of the airframe, and this should sit neatly against that curve with the beveled area that we have at the nose just poking up above it. And obviously the frame itself, or the skin itself, should come right to the front of the nose with our little sandwich of Depron pieces at the front there. So it should sit. Now, ideally, this part of the fuselage, if I bring that up to the camera a little bit more, this part of the fuselage should sit flush on the top of this sandwich. But if it doesn't, then we can always sand this part down. What we are aiming for is that little overlap on the underside here. Let's start with our one side at a time method. In fact, what I'm going to do is bring this side up first, and I'm only going to glue the areas behind the cockpit, and I'm going to do the nose as a separate entity in the next phase. So, okay, just putting some glue on the edge of the formers. I'm going to bring the fuselage side up. And just get some glue in the areas that the fuselage skin is going to come in contact with. And then I'm actually going to let it fold back down and let the glue dry a little before bringing it up. And hopefully we're going to get that grab of the almost dry glue, and we won't have to take things down or hold it for any great length of time. So the other area that I'm going to add some glue to is this front part too. There we go. And forward former. So I'm just going to get a little more glue onto the other side, let it fall apart. Right, our glue is suitably dry, so I'm going to start bringing the sides up. Firstly, make sure the top of my skin at the tail sits flush with the top of the keel itself. And then I'm going to make sure that I get the correct fit at the first former, and then all of the others should just press on and follow suit. So because I dry fitted previously, I'm happy that all my levels are where they should be. I haven't had to do any sanding or reduce any of the formers, but if you do find in your dry fit that there are some protrusions or something could be improved by a little bit of sanding, just get the sanding stick out and go to it. So I'm happy with all those positions. The glue has grabbed nicely, so I don't have to hold anything in place. And now I can move to the other side. This is all structural, so you want to be relatively generous with the glue. Once again, keeping in mind that more glue equals more weight. Okay, now let's just bring it up into position temporarily. So we get glue on both surfaces, and then pull it apart, get rid of any of the cobweb, and just wait for that to dry. So let's bring this other side up, making sure our tail skin comes up to the correct level. There we go. Right, now I've got all of that in place. The last bit I need to do is glue the nose down and then glue the undercarriage legs to the skin in the correct location so we can actually get the axle through. So first of all, I need to get my adhesive onto the underside of here, which just involves moving the skin away from that area and then just running the glue all over that to get some good adhesion. And this time I am going to do both sides at the same time. So, as I said, what we want is that little 1mm overlap as we approach the nose of the skin over the airframe. Okay, so the glue is suitably dry now that it will grab, so we're going to make sure that we've got this little overlap on as much of the nose area as possible. So that's one side done. I can just press everything into place, and let's go in on the second side. Okay, that all looks good, all presses in nicely. Now the only things we've got left to do are to attach the skin to the undercarriage legs. That's a simple matter of gluing and just positioning. Obviously on the undercarriage leg we have this hole here, and that's for the axle to go through, obviously on both sides, and we have a hole in the skin too. Now the idea is to get that as central as possible on the inner hole as central on the outer hole as possible. Hopefully you can see how that forms. Sometimes it needs a little manhandling, so what we're going to do is pop some more glue onto our undercarriage legs, deftly avoiding the hole itself, and go with the other side too. avoiding that hole, but getting enough glue on there so that everything sticks. Now obviously this area, the undercarriage, gets quite a bit of abuse, so we can be once again quite generous with the adhesive. Okay, so once again I am going to let the glue do the work and just bring the two pieces together and take them apart again. Same on the other side, bring them together, take them apart again, removing any of the cobweb. Okay, so we'll just let that dry and then position them accordingly. Now the glue's dried, we'll bring these the skin up to the correct place on the undercarriage. Just make sure our holes line up and everything should grab on and grab hold nicely. Go. Okay, all nice and solid. We have our fuselage skin on. Our next step is to fill the area here with the rest of the fuselage skin. It comes in 3 pieces and it's on the fuselage sprue, or certainly what's left of it. So we've got Z2, Z3 and Z4 which will go on next. So let's release them from the sprue. So I'll just put these 2 parts to one side for now, and we'll concentrate on this particular part. That actually sits, try the other way around, that sits down here like so, and you can see we need to bevel the underside of these 2 edges here where they meet with the fuselage bottom, or the fuselage skin bottom on this curve. So let's set to. Okay, that looks good enough. And put our our score just across that part there. There we go. And this part actually, the score's there just to allow it to flex up a bit like that. So we're putting this part, you can see that little ledge that we left there enables us to position that nice and accurately, and then bring that part down. So next stage is just to add some glue so we can position this part and actually adhere it to the fuselage. So once again, I'm going to bring the part to bear on the position that it's supposed to be in, so I can get glue onto both surfaces. There we go. And then remove and let that dry or semi-dry before actually positioning it onto the fuselage. Okay, let's finish this off. Let's get a good position on our part here. And then press it into all the areas we have glued. And what you'll find is the foam's quite malleable, and when you get little edges, as you do along here, there's a little trick. As you can see, there's well, we've beveled it, but there's still a little bit of a white line around there, and you have quite a sharp edge. Now what you can do is, using a thumb or fingernail, you can just rub along the area with the back of the fingernail, applying a reasonable amount of pressure, but just rub it, and what you'll find is that those thin edges that we've created through beveling actually pull together, and as you can see, you get a lovely join with pretty much no exposure of the white foam on the edges. So yeah, just rub the edges and they come together really nicely. And it also rounds it off slightly, providing a much more appealing edge. There we go. Okay, so we've now got to get the inner portion of the undercarriage onto the frame, but before that there are some little stickers we've got to decorate the inside of the last piece of the undercarriage here that has the holes for the axle. We don't have any skin that goes over these that's made from this particular material, so we use a sticker to tidy this area up. So here we have our stickers. It's S7 and S8. S7 sits on the port side on that side there, so let's just peel that off. Now there's obviously a bit of a contour here for the strut of the undercarriage, and we've got a bit that's actually come away with the sticker that we don't need, so I'll just remove that from the sticker, and then let's position that onto okay, that could be a little bit better. So let's see. Can't peel that off because we've only put it on lightly, and actually that's better. There we go. Just press that down with some thumb pressure. There we go, that's S7 on. Next, S8. Get rid of that. Excuse my silence. I am concentrating. So there we go. So that takes care of that part of the decoration. Now the next thing we need to do, we'll just pop this to one side for now and tidy up these parts. So to prepare our little parts for the undercarriage, we need to do, so, excuse me, and the dog sneezing, we need to bevel some of these edges so that we get a nice fit onto the aircraft. Firstly, we'll do what is the leading edge, then the trailing edge as well. The leading edge can be doesn't have to be particularly shallow because that goes in at quite a steep angle to the join. But the trailing edge needs to be a little shallower, so we need to take off more material. And the other area that I need to bevel is just on the edges that join onto the underside of the aircraft. They don't need to be particularly shallow, but just means that the coloured portion of the part will go right down onto the part that it's joining onto. And the other thing we need to do is we need to put a crease, a score into the part from the apex of the skin there through to the marked area, the little tooth knocked out. So just like that, back of the blade, nice and shallow, straight through. And if I can pick it up now, so that then folds over like so. Right, if we do the same with the other part. So, put that to one side for now. If we turn our aircraft over, take one of our parts, and then you can see that that actually sits like so. on the underside of the aircraft. So to make sure that that happens, we can now apply some glue. I'm going to run glue down the strut here, and I'm going to put some onto the leading and the trailing edge. And also onto, now you notice, and I've just noticed, I've got some glue on my finger there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to rub it onto the board and rub it off. Now if I didn't do that and I touch the printed side of the part, then I get glue all over it and it's a pain to get off. It will come off, but it's a process I don't want to have to get involved with if I can avoid it. So there we go. All our glue is on. Now I've left the upper edge unglued. You don't have to glue that down. What I'm going to do is just apply the part to the leading edge, like so, and then bring it round to the trailing edge. Make sure there's some glue put down on both sides, and once again just take the part away from there and let the glue set. Whilst that's doing, we can get on with the other side. So, go in with the leading edge, fold down to the trailing edge, get that glue on, and then part can come off and wait until that glue sets. So whilst we're waiting for the glue to set, let me just show you how to clear the nozzle on the Yoo-hoo. It's pretty straightforward. You just hold the tube upright and then just using your thumb and finger remove any of the excess, and then you can ball it up in the finger and dispose of it accordingly. But you can use that ball if you've got any extra bits clinging on to the nozzle. Just use that ball as a way of grabbing it and moving it away. So there we go. The nozzle is clean. Right. Back to popping our parts on. So pop that down on the leading edge. Fold it round to the trailing edge. There we go. You can pinch the material together to make sure it's got good adhesion. Again onto the leading edge, fold over the trailing edge. There we go. Right. Well, I'm not quite happy with how one of these has gone down. We've missed the alignment slightly. The glue's set and I don't want to risk having to try and peel it off. Certainly probably wouldn't come away whole, or I would create lots of creases on the material. So what I'm going to do is get my my lighter fluid and a little paintbrush, and hopefully I can demonstrate to you how this stuff works. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to just load the brush with some of the fluid. There we go, spilling it all over the place, and then just apply it to that part in the area that I want it to release, and hopefully you'll see that it actually comes away relatively easily. Good. So put my lighter fluid away. Now I can realign. In fact, probably I remove that, I'll add a little more glue. So as you can see, the part literally falls away once you've put that that lighter fluid on. It works really well. And as I said before, it's not just immediately after you glue it, it will actually work on older models too that you want to restore or renovate. Okay. Just go. That's more like it. So, well, it seems to have grabbed anyway with the old glue as well, so I'm going to leave it like that. Might have to hold it for a short while on the leading edge. But, there, so making the adjustment pretty easy, even though the glue had dried. Let's see if we can use it to clear up some of the excess glue. So this brush is quite stiff actually, so it picks up the glue too that you brush away. So that's very good. I haven't used it much myself, the lighter fluid. I only found out about it relatively recently. But yeah, it seems to be working a treat. Probably too well for what I'm trying to do here, but anyway, good. There we go. Much cleaner. Okay, I'm going to use my little thumbnail trick on the, although I'm using using my fingernail this time, well, it seems to be in the right place, just to bring about a little neater finish to that front edge. I mean, you don't have to use your fingernail. You can actually use I've actually used the metal handle of the knife, for example, but with a finger or thumbnail you can actually feel what's going on underneath. You can judge the pressure so much more accurately. Okay, so there we have the rest of the fuselage skin on. So what have we got left to do? Well, this has got to be smoothed off here, so a bit of sanding's involved, plus a sticker, and we have to put the deck on at the back here. And once we've done that, we can start putting the tail and the rudder, horizontal stabilizer, vertical stabilizer in place.